Alright, what's going on, guys? Ladies and gentlemen, they got him. Apparently. So a few days ago we got a new update for Elden Ring. Oddly enough on a Wednesday morning, and this update was not without its controversy. Elden Ring patch 1.14 dropped, and it made a pretty significant change that a lot of people are split right down the middle on. A lot of people were asking for it, and a lot weren't, but we're gonna break it down, see if things that changed were pretty significant or are being blown out of proportion. But I think we actually need to talk about the patch overall and the nature of patches for Elden Ring in general, because even though they are doing pretty regular patches for the game, I think the core issues aren't being addressed, and we're gonna break all that down. But not wasting any more time, let's go ahead and get straight into the patch notes. Right off the bat, we get into possibly the biggest change that this patch introduced to Elden Ring. Final boss balance adjustments. The following adjustments have been made to the final boss of Shadow of the Erdtree. That is right, big boy Radahn got nerfed again. And I've seen a lot of people talking about this, saying they nerfed him into the ground. A lot of people angry, a lot of people happy, but let's see what they actually did. The first bullet point says, change the action pattern when the battle starts. Adjusted some attack moves. Decrease the damage of some attacks. Decrease stamina damage of some attacks. Decrease the attack range of some non-weapon based attacks. And improve the visibility of some attack effects. So as usual, Bandai doesn't really give us the specifics on these exact changes, so we have to test it ourselves. This new Radahn does feel different. I don't know if it was me overcompensating for the new rhythm, but they made him slower. And I'm not gonna lie, man, I had phase 1 memorized, but he was messing me up pretty bad. And it took me a minute to tell if I'm dodging too early or waiting too long. It's just different. Now ultimately, I do think this new timing is going to make the fight easier overall. Now when we look at it side by side, you can definitely tell that the pre-nerf Radahn is faster overall. It's not so much that you can immediately recognize it, but I could feel it. And it may be a little bit of placebo as well. However, that is the common consensus I was seeing online. And obviously I don't have the exact frame data or hitbox changes or anything like that. I can only go off what I felt, and it felt different. Enough to really mess me up and take me a few times to actually get the rhythm back. So I definitely don't think I can say they nerfed him into the ground and he's just a pushover now, but it is a nerf for sure. Is it over the top and he's no longer the hardest boss in the game? I'm not sure I'd go that far, but you guys that have fought him a lot after this patch, how bad do you think it is? Part of me does have to question though, why now? Why make such a big change this far after release? Perhaps it's to throw a bone to those players that have been struggling this entire time and never did beat him. But on the other side, you have to weigh the idea that this is supposed to be the ultimate challenge in all of Elden Ring. This is the final boss. There's nothing after Radahn. So it's supposed to be the hardest fight in the game, and you should struggle with it. Now, I'm not saying that to be a gatekeeper. If you really care that much about getting to the end screen, then you probably would have just cheesed him already. I just can't really imagine that this far from the drop of the DLC, that people who don't care about using those means to win would still be struggling with Radahn. And those that obviously don't want to, probably wouldn't like the idea of him getting nerfed so heavily. I'm not saying this nerf shouldn't have happened, or that that's the only way to think about it. I'm just thinking out loud right now. It just feels a little strange, that's all. But what do you guys think? Let me know down below. Another thing that came out that wasn't actually part of the update, but dropped alongside it that you'll likely find interesting is an infographic, detailing statistics from the DLC since launch. First of all, we have some summon statistics. 35% of players summoned Dryleaf Dane against Romina, 29% of players summoned Freya against the Dancing Lion, and 22% summoned Leda against R'Lana. And I actually find that really interesting because out of these three bosses, I think Romina is by far the easiest, so that is pretty surprising to me. But what is by far more surprising is that the spirit eel has claimed nearly 300,000 bodies. How? That one's wild, man. I kinda wish we had like the stone in Dark Souls 2 that tells you the total amount of deaths that players have had, but one just for the spirit eels somewhere in the DLC. That one's crazy to me. But what's not surprising to me is that Impenetrable Thorns was by far the most used spell in the DLC. Stupidly overpowered and could cheese bosses through the fog wall, that's understandable. Knight's Lightning Spear is also pretty understandable. It's a fun spell, it's useful, does pretty good damage, so I get it. But as for Tehlu being the most common spirit summon, that one's pretty surprising to me too. Unless there's something I'm missing that sets it apart, I don't really see the advantage in using Tehlu over the others, so you're gonna have to educate me on that one if there's something I'm missing. So pretty interesting stuff there. I'm glad they share these with the community because it's always fun to see the stats like that. Onward to the rest of the patch, we got some balance adjustments. Backhand blades, spears dual wielded, and the pada all got nerfs. And I'm glad because the backhand blades have been a kind of menace ever since they came out. And we're only talking PvP here. Dual spears, we've been needing this nerf since day one. The spread crossbow will no longer do headshot damage motion when hitting another player. So I'm guessing they're talking about the stagger there, but I'm not totally sure. Scattershot throw got a nerf, decreased damage totally, and no longer does the headshot damage motion as well. Discus hurl got nerfed, and then I'm pretty sad about this next one, but weed cutter got the poise nerfed, which was its main draw. Now we have overall balance adjustments for the entire game, and there's a lot to get through, so we're just gonna hit some of the high points. The uncharged version of the first heavy attack for nearly every weapon type received a speed buff. They nerfed the speed of attack with the great katanas. Hand-to-hand arts got a pretty big buff. Colossal swords did as well. Backhand blades got nerfed again, and then the Rolana's cameo talisman got a pretty big buff. The swords of light and darkness got a buff to their weapon arts, which I think was very needed. Rolana's twin blades Ash of War also got a buff, surprisingly, and Devonia's vortex got a big buff. Rolana's twin moons got a buff, and then several of the new DLC incantations got buffed as well, which I think was also needed, because while they were really cool, they kind of lacked utility. And then a long list of bug fixes that you are welcome to read through. Unfortunately, I don't see the one on here where Radahn just dies if you're playing co-op after the Leda fight, but we'll see. Now, all of that is well and good. Like I said, I'm very glad that they're keeping support this far and continuing to do these balance changes, but I can't help but feel like we're at a point in time with this game where these types of updates are kind of pointless. And I'm primarily talking about multiplayer here, because sure, balancing in PvE is good, but it's not a super big deal. If something is overpowered in PvE, it can just be fun. You can just choose not to use it, but in PvP, you don't get to choose what your opponent is using. So balance is critical there, but every time one of these updates comes out, all that happens is the meta changes. People find the new overpowered thing, and it's a never-ending cycle. Now yes, ideally, perfect balance would be great, but it's not realistic. There's always going to be something that's better than others. So as long as they're shooting close to that, I'm okay with it. But the fundamentals of Elden Ring's PvP have never been addressed. We don't have 6-player worlds. Solo host invasions are probably never coming back. It's almost impossible to find a non-duel match in the Colosseum. There's virtually no incentive for playing PvP at all, and the jank is still there. I still get hit by attacks across the room, which is why things like poking are exploited. But we've been over these issues a million times. The PvP community has not stopped being vocal about it, so I just have to ask, are we ever going to address the real issues here? And if not, then what's the point of all this balancing? Because the end result is always the same. Again, I'm not trying to disparage the work they do. Again, I appreciate it. I'm just being honest here. It's a never-ending loop. You know what I'm saying? Every new balancing creates something overpowered, and then they have to nerf it in the next patch, or something gets nerfed too much and it gets buffed again later. You see the picture here. Why not just use the energy and improve the fundamentals? At the bare minimum, 6-player worlds and some covenants. That would do more for the health of the game and multiplayer than 99% of balancing. That's just my opinion though. You're free to disagree. Since those were things we already had in the past and we got to see them work, that feeling that they could be here is never going to go away for me. But that is patch 1.14. A few days late, I'm sorry about that, but how are we feeling about it? Good, bad, somewhere in the middle, do you even care? Personally, I'm pretty indifferent, and that goes for the Radahn nerf as well. I wasn't really asking for it, but I don't know how others feel. Either way though, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. Subscribe if you're new around here, and with all that, I will catch you in the next one.